Yeah, I mean, thinking about some of these videos I've been doing, going back to the 3rd of June. So, radicals and communitarianism in the 1980s, a perspective on video diarying, locale, the internet and piracy, rebels, sellouts and aesthetics, and finally, time, space and place. It's sort of, I mean, what was apparently called blogging in the 90s was considered to be a log of things you'd observed on the internet. And sort of these videos have sort of been a log of, or an attempt at a log of primarily things that came during the 20th century, before I was born, after I was born, and so on. Then trying to piece things together with stuff I've picked up over time, like apparently there's this term called media ecology. Doesn't really say that much. It doesn't really go into much. Whereas I prefer a term like media archaeology in the Foucauldian sense. That seems to be a more interesting approach to me. I mean, luckily, when I went into post-school education, I took up the subjects not only of psychology but sociology as well, and I think that was important. I mean, the BBC had this series, put out this series called Century of the Self, which looked from the perspective, apparently, of the early advertising industry and onwards. And I'd say there was an emphasis on the self that became increasingly evident in a overt sense as time, as time went on. That went way over the top. The early supposed influence of the early advertisers who tapped into overblown notions of psychoanalytic, psychoanalytically tapping into people's deeper, inherent, innate fears, and all that. But I suppose as they got more sophisticated, and did advertisers, and when monetarism started to come along, they did sort of lead to a situation where there was way too much interest in things like psychology. Following on from the how monetarism became ever stronger over time, for example. And then that was reflected in like media content and stuff like that. But I don't really buy into that it was a century of the self at all. It was a century where there was an element where there was an emphasis on the self, but that sort of ignores things like the post-World War II years, which brought about Keynesianism, which came before monetarism, and the formation of different organisations. For example, I've mentioned the European community, where communitarianism, like in the video I mentioned, the first video that started really dealing with this log of the times primarily of the 20th century, and trying to, see that in some more interesting way. So yeah, and I could see that in people where this increasing concentration on the self was a mistake. And again, this ever more increasing concentration on topics and disciplines like psychology. Yet when you look at the general trend of the 20th century, it was communitaire for the most part. Well, for the period between 45 and the mid to late 70s, and then gradually the influence of monetarism did become increasingly evident across a whole load of sectors of society. And again, the selling techniques in the market, in consumerism, became more sophisticated over time, and a lot of people who didn't have any critical sense became swept up into it in ways that they shouldn't have, I suppose. I think that I came from a period and was influenced by a preceding period that stood me in good stead, I think, even though presentism, as it's called apparently, may be in play here. I did have the wherewithal to be able to sort of deal with that period better, in a better way than a lot of people did. I suppose the web itself claimed to have led to more fragmentation to the level of society, to the level of the individual. I still see social trends. Like, for example, you see fragmentation on the different media, or that's what I've seen. You can still pretty much categorise it into groups, a vast array of content. It's still capable of being, made sense of and put into a different theoretical into a theoretical perspective with effective categorization, I think. And apparently with work being done to get people to better manage their approach to the media scene that they come across, and the attempts of governments and organisations to sort of reclaim the power dynamic, if you like, over the fragmentation the web initially brought about, with implications maybe, but yeah, there's always sort of been that anyway. Again, that may be presentism, or whatever it's called. But yeah, time, space, and place. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. You know, like I said, I'll consider myself lucky to have been brought up in the time that I was. Very lucky. But again, people today at the age I was going in the lead up to through the different technological advances that I experienced will be going through. Will have experienced technological advances that I don't think were as interesting and divergent as the ones I experienced, and a significant amount of my generation did experience. A lot of people, my generation, weren't really that interested in that sort of stuff, but a significant degree of us were. And having that early interest in not just the what was becoming more and more powerful disciplines like psychology, but sociology, politics, for example, an interest in that, and literature as well, media and stuff. Sort of building blocks to that are important. And I wouldn't know whether sociologists taught at a earlier or lower level, whatever term you want to use. Important subject, that. Really important subject. The argument could be made about me being an armchair psychologist, if you like. But I think I've come across quite a few of those in my time. But important to have had that broader range. Really important. And now, I don't know, the challenges of the time will be met by people who've apparently got their finger on the pulse, and stuff like that. But I can't help thinking, if you haven't got a ground not only, psychology, and disciplines like psychology are important in a way to for the times, for the economic model that came about in the 80s, and I don't know if it's still as dominant as what it was, but I'll be surprised if the stuff in the media, the headline stuff, about the numbers of people who need psychiatric treatment and have psychiatric diagnostic labels and all that sort of stuff, is what it's been made out to be. I'll be very surprised if a technology like the web brought that about, because surely it would have addressed some of the some of the issues that were thrown up by the increase in use of psychoanalytic techniques by people who organisations that sell consumer products and the organisations that sell consumer products. You know, if you take a caricatured view of them, you could see them as these, you know, in a certain way. But you know, I do recall a trend really beginning in the 80s where organisations did start to become more sort of tapping into that post-war Keynesian social approach to things. I do remember that starting in the 80s with some organisations. I'd be surprised if that trend hasn't persisted over time. But yeah, so again, the appearances that from what I can gather, or the appearances has been given, the topic disciplines or whatever, like psychology, have become ever more popular, and people are engrossed with their psychology and so on and so forth. I'd be very surprised if that really was the case. The web is too outward looking in too many respects, and like that's the sort of thing that I've tried to cover in these videos from the one Radicals and Communitarianism in the 1980s. I'll be very surprised if that was the situation. But yeah. Yeah. And another thing that's good from my view of the media, I remember, I think a couple of theme parks that I went to when I was a teenager. One not far from me, I'm pretty sure there was one there as well. And they had this dome, right? And you'd go in there and you'd see a depiction of space. This would have been less than 20 years after the moon landings of, I think, 1969. And you stand there. I think they projected it onto the floor as well. You stand there, you look up at all this stuff, fascinating stuff. That's sort of a metaphor for how you can view this stuff. You know, but yeah. I mean, yeah, there was a time when blogs, if that's that was the term that was independently used for people who logged what they came across on the internet, on the web. Could have been, but you know, obviously as time's gone on, the definition is extended. So other people have been looking beyond the web to society and the individual, agency and structure, and other debates as well. Both within and beyond that dichotomy. But yeah. Well, I'm quite chuffed that I had those early interests in, like I said, not only psychology, which was really overemphasised, I think, though necessary in an era of in such an era of consumerism. But I don't think it should have. For example, I came across it in further education. I'm not sure that it should have been taught at further education. I don't think it should have been given that prominence. Maybe at higher education. But maybe a personal bias, sociology, definitely. That had been the from 45 to the late 70s that had been the driving force. And then from about the mid 80s to the at least the early to mid 90s, it pretty much turned to shit, and people, and like issues of people's neurosis got way too much attention, and people weren't given the wherewithal. Like with me, with not just psychology, but sociology, politics, media, and so on. An early interest in those things, literature as well, which I sort of suppose is linked to media in terms of literary theory, being linked to cultural theory. Good ground in that. Not necessarily what I learned, but the interest was there. So yeah. A log of the times that came before me, and the times I witnessed. From about, I guess my early memories go back to about 1973, I think. 1972, 1973, maybe. But yeah, quite interesting. But again, presentism, I'm not unique in this sense. I remember coming across people when I was growing up who'd talk about the old times and so on and so forth. Anyone watching this, if there is anyone watching this stuff, would probably see it in those terms. 30, 40, 50 years does seem like a long time, but and they're not really. They're not really. Like I said, the older you get, the more time time compresses, but not necessarily in every way. This is like what I mentioned yesterday about my sense of time being the only comparison I can draw is like being at work. That sense of even when I'm talking about past events, current events, future events, it is with that sense of time. The way my mind is working. But yeah, what was it called? I can't remember what it was called. Those big domes that they used to have. Or were they circular? I can't remember. I'll have to look them all. Probably won't come across any, but anyway. But they were pretty good. They were pretty well. They're good as a metaphor. Probably more impressive as a metaphor than they were in actuality. But yeah, what log of events and stuff that came before me and that I've witnessed since. Interesting, at least to me. But maybe then again, I'm turned into one of those ones who sit on the porch talking about the old times. Yeah. At the end of that video, I said I'll maybe turn into one of those people who sit on the porch thinking about the old times. Personally, can't see it. I've got too much of an active interest in too many areas, and always pretty much have had. I sort of mentioned in that video about a journal or a government publication called Social Trends, which I loved. I thought it was absolutely amazing. It really was. The stuff you could find out in there, and like I say, that was an early interest in society, and that sort of led on to something I looked up, which was linked to that term I used called presentism. Apparently, that term's used where there is a process where each era goes through a period of seeing its era as uniquely complex in comparison with the past eras, which are seen as simple, and other stuff that taps into what many people have, which is some sort of neurosis of nostalgia, and people do, like I say, initially see their era as complex, as almost uniquely complex, and then they go through a process where they eventually come to the point of figuring out their era, getting an understanding of it, and sense of perspective over it, and it becomes the norm, normalised, taken for granted. So I'd be surprised if, for example, the organisations that throughout the media that I've seen were anthropomorphised as seaside in certain ways, because like I pointed to, there was this trend from at least, I'm pretty sure the 80s, maybe the early 90s, where organisations did, the people running these organisations at the time would have had lived through the period that I mentioned, the post-war, 1945 to late 70s era. And quite a significant amount of time that followed on from that before monetarist policies really took hold and became so influential in society. And with the approach of the early, what were called ad men, the early advertisers linked to commerce, that period of complexity and so on, and disempowerment to these great big companies that sold products and supposedly tapped into most people, to everyone's deepest fears and anxieties and so on and so forth. Even if that wasn't overstated and overblown, that period, that process, would have had a significant effect. Going from a process of complexity to eventual adaptation and normalisation. And every era goes through it. Every era's apparently always gone through it, and every era does. So again, with the sociology of leisure, where increasingly, and off the back of things like monetarism and stuff like that, and the stuff I already mentioned, that society became more individualised. There still would have been an adaptation in terms of things like this overconcentration of things like psychology and people's neuroses and people's need for organisational, institutional support and all that sort of thing. I'll be very surprised if people hadn't adapted to those processes and that adaptation becoming normalised in society, like with advertising, like with organisations, like with commerce, like with monetarism and stuff like that, like with the web, which I sort of again started off seeming so complex, and yet now we look back at that early web as being simple and naive, but like it was cutting edge at the time. Another important influence that I mentioned, that I've mentioned before but didn't mention in this video, was gaming. For example, early home computers and stuff like that. So yeah, interesting stuff. Really interesting stuff. Now it ties in other elements of what of if you apply a term like media archaeology or societal archaeology, or maybe even social and psychological archaeology, you can sort of get a grasp of. So yeah, if people in society haven't adapted to commerce and the economy, whatever way it's run these days, to politics, whatever way that's run, to the media, to the workings of their minds and so on and so forth, and their approach to the societies and the world around them, I'll be very surprised. I'll be very surprised. Not least with the web. How that's characterised as needing all this regulation and so on and so forth. Maybe a degree of it, but not to the extent that I think it's made out. Like I say, that process would surely have happened. I mean, it's what is it, 91 apparently? Apparently, the web came about in 91. I thought it was 92. Okay, 91, 90, 100, 10, 20, 34 years ago. The web was released. That is another era. If people haven't adapted to that by now, and these are the things that supposedly led to people being off their heads, then I ain't buying it, and I don't think most people would. But yeah. Oh, another thing I didn't emphasise was this enjoyment of language. One of the things I mentioned was the audio visuals of the early live broadcasts that I saw of, for example, football. That I only talk about in terms of the audio visuals and the in terms of the psychological, social, perceptual influence and sense, the perception of it. But a guy called Barry Davis. It was just really lyrical. The way he spoke about something that is, popular but pretty simple. Sport, well, simple, maybe not simple. It does have its complexities, I suppose, in its way. In their way, these different sports. But he commentates on football and tennis. And he was just, no one came close to that guy. But yeah, there was that as well. Which it didn't sort of have an influence on me in terms of literature and interest in language. But it was just enjoyment. It was just enjoyable to hear this guy talk. And at the time, I didn't even appreciate it. It was only in retrospect years later that I thought, well, hang on a sec, that guy was someone else. But yeah, now it's sort of, as far as I'm aware, they try to build up the excitement and all that in ways that differ from that. I don't think anyone's got that skill. But then again, maybe Davis did tap into that. To a tradition that no longer applies, like changes in oratory that I mentioned, that changes from oratory that I mentioned came about with Thatcher. But yeah. But anyway, that's just going off on one a bit. The central thing really is societies, organisations, groups, governments do eventually adapt to normalise each era that seems so complex. At the time, it emerges. Just like it was with the web, and I'm sure everyone's adapted to that by now, as well as monetarism and consumerism and stuff like that. I'm sure people are doing all right. Thank you very much.